Hello and welcome back to NPA Discovery, where we uncover the untold stories of the world's most fascinating icons. If you're passionate about the dramatic highs and lows behind Hollywood legends and media giants, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving deep into the extraordinary, and at times shocking, life of one of late-night television's most iconic figures, David Letterman. This isn't just a tale about jokes, monologues, and awkward interviews. This is the story of a man who revolutionized comedy, redefined the late-night format, made countless enemies and even more fans, and eventually, against all odds, found a way to redeem himself in the public eye. But here's the big question: can a man who built an empire on sarcasm and cynicism find peace in sincerity? Can someone so often shrouded in controversy ultimately win back the audience he pushed away? I believe the answer is yes, but it came at a tremendous cost. Let's explore. If you enjoy these kinds of deep dives into the lives of cultural icons, please don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more incredible stories just like this. A boy from Indianapolis with a dream. Before he was a household name, before the fame, scandals, and million-dollar contracts, David Letterman was just a quirky, insecure kid growing up in Indianapolis, Indiana. He adored his father, Harry, a man with a razor-sharp sense of humor. Harry's sudden heart attack at the young age of 36 changed young Dave forever. Though Harry survived that incident, the specter of mortality left a permanent mark on Dave, a fear he would later turn into humor as a defense mechanism. The final blow came when Harry died of a fatal heart attack in 1973, never getting to see the heights his son would eventually reach. That grief, mixed with unresolved guilt and ambition, became a driving force in Dave's life. Letterman's first foray into media wasn't exactly glamorous. He was a radio talk show host, but he quickly got fired for mocking classical music on air. It was a sign of things to come. Letterman never fit neatly into any box. He was rebellious, irreverent, and always towing the line between genius and insubordination. Letterman's first real taste of the spotlight came when he became a weatherman at a local Indianapolis TV station. But this was no ordinary weatherman. Dave would predict hail the size of canned hams and deliver forecasts for fictional cities. Viewers were confused, and entertained. This early brush with fame revealed a core truth: David Letterman was never meant to follow the rules. He was destined to rewrite them. In 1968, Letterman married his college sweetheart, Michelle Cook. But it was Michelle who pushed him toward Los Angeles, believing in his comedic potential. They packed up their lives in a pickup truck and headed west. That move marked the beginning of Letterman's rise to stardom, and the end of their marriage. While Dave was hustling through odd gigs, writing for forgettable sitcoms, and appearing on shows that barely made a dent, Michelle was left behind in the wake of his ambition. Their marriage dissolved in 1977, a casualty of dreams pursued and hearts ignored. This period of Letterman's life is often glossed over, but it holds a deep lesson. Ambition, when left unchecked, can become a monster that devours the very relationships that once sustained us. Dave wasn't just chasing fame, he was running from grief, inadequacy, and the fear of failure. And like many men of that era, he thought success would be his salvation. He was wrong. In the 1970s, one name ruled late-night television: Johnny Carson. Getting on The Tonight Show wasn't just a career move, it was a coronation. Carson saw something in Letterman that others hadn't. The dry wit. The awkward charm. The intelligence hidden behind self-deprecation. Dave became a regular and even guest-hosted the show several times. Carson was grooming him as a successor. Or so it seemed. But in 1992, when Carson finally retired, NBC shocked everyone by handing The Tonight Show over to Jay Leno. Dave, who had given the network everything, felt betrayed. It was the kind of professional heartbreak that leaves scars. And so, he made a bold move. He left NBC and took his talents to CBS. This wasn't just a career pivot. It was an emotional response to betrayal. Dave created The Late Show with David Letterman as a direct answer to the loss of The Tonight Show. And in many ways, it surpassed the original. It was edgier, funnier, and more daring. But Letterman's increasing success came with a cost. Personal relationships continued to crumble. The courage and cowardice of confession. This moment is still debated. Some saw it as brave, an act of transparency in an era where so many deny. But others viewed it as manipulative, a calculated move to control the narrative before someone else could. Here lies the contradiction of David Letterman, a man who could own up to failure and yet seemed incapable of changing the behavior that caused it. The fallout was massive. One of the women involved was Stephanie Burkett, his longtime assistant, who had also been in a relationship with CBS producer Joe Halderman, the very man who tried to blackmail him using Burkett's diary and emails. Halderman was arrested and later sentenced to 6 months in jail. Letterman, however, had to face the court of public opinion, and, more painfully, the judgment of his longtime partner, Regina Lasko. Letterman and Lasko had been together for over 2 decades and had a son together. They married in 2009, just months before the scandal broke. Imagine that, celebrating your wedding and then, shortly after, watching your husband confess to the world that he betrayed you. By all accounts, Lasko was furious. She withdrew from the public eye, and the atmosphere at home became tense. Behind the scenes, Letterman was reportedly overwhelmed by guilt and shame. He said later in interviews that the affair revelations nearly destroyed his life. It's important to address the larger implications. In the years that followed, particularly in the wake of the #MeToo movement, the idea of a boss having relationships with subordinates became more than a scandal, it was a clear abuse of power. Letterman's case is complex. Some of the relationships may have been consensual, but the power imbalance was undeniable. While he avoided legal consequences, the situation forced a broader conversation about workplace ethics in the entertainment industry. And within his staff, morale reportedly plummeted. Writers and producers were summoned for long, tense meetings after tapings, meetings that often dragged into the night. It wasn't about the show, it was about Dave not wanting to go home. That kind of emotional avoidance turned into a toxic workplace culture. David Letterman's story at this stage mirrors many figures who reached the summit of success. With no more mountains to climb, the battle turns inward. For Letterman, the real enemy was no longer Jay Leno or celebrity guests. It was his own inability to balance power, desire, and responsibility. The long road to redemption. After the storm came silence. In the wake of his public confession, David Letterman disappeared from the media spotlight, not entirely, but enough to make the world wonder what would become of him. Would he quietly retire? Would the scandal swallow his legacy? It didn't, but the man who emerged from the ashes was very different from the one who had once ruled late night with an iron smirk. Dave continued to host The Late Show for 6 more years after the scandal broke. And in that time, he gradually changed. The show lost a bit of its bite, its caustic edge, but gained something richer, introspection. In interviews and monologues, Letterman spoke more candidly about his faults, his failures, and his journey toward understanding. He praised his wife Regina for staying with him. He talked about therapy. He didn't make excuses. That humility resonated. Viewers who once saw him as a distant, sarcastic figure began to connect with him on a more human level. Late-night comedy wasn't just about laughs anymore, it was about growth. In 2015, David Letterman signed off from The Late Show for the final time. His farewell wasn't flashy. It wasn't bitter. It was nostalgic, warm, and honest. A man once known for mocking sentimentality delivered a heartfelt goodbye that even his harshest critics respected. He didn't try to reclaim his throne. He didn't fight to stay relevant in an industry obsessed with youth and trends. Instead, he stepped aside and gave the spotlight to the next generation. Then came the surprise. In 2018, Letterman returned, not to network TV, but to Netflix, with a series titled My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. The format was simple, long-form interviews with some of the most influential people in the world. Barack Obama, Malala Yousafzai, Billie Eilish, George Clooney. Gone were the zingers and awkward pauses. What remained was curiosity, depth, and vulnerability. Letterman listened more than he spoke. He asked real questions. He laughed with sincerity. It was, perhaps, the most human version of David Letterman we had ever seen. Redemption doesn't mean erasure. Letterman's past, his feuds, his scandals, his shortcomings, will always be part of his story. But that's what makes his journey so powerful. He didn't rewrite his history. He built on it. He faced the music. He evolved. In a world that often disposes of flawed men without reflection, Letterman chose to reflect. He chose to do better. And that choice matters. What can we learn from David Letterman? That brilliance often comes with baggage. That growth is messy, slow, and painful. And that redemption, when earned, is one of the most powerful forces in storytelling. Letterman has said he was lucky, that he got the chance to fix what he broke. But I believe luck alone didn't save him. Courage did. The courage to admit he was wrong. The courage to change. And maybe, just maybe, the courage to become a man his son could be proud of. A legacy that lives beyond the laughs. As the world watched Letterman age into his gray-bearded, post-network twilight, something remarkable happened. The anger faded. The controversies settled like dust in a quiet room. What lingered was the unmistakable imprint of a man who had not only shaped an entire genre, but also dared to evolve within it. You don't have to love Letterman to feel his impact. From Stephen Colbert to John Oliver, Seth Meyers to Conan O'Brien, nearly every late-night host today carries traces of Letterman's style. The wry pauses. The ironic distance. The mock interviews that walk the line between absurdity and genius. And it's not just in content. It's in tone. Letterman broke late night away from the polished, showbiz polish of Carson. He made it messy, real, human. Even his faults, his well-known awkwardness, his uneasy relationship with fame, his occasional cruelty, have served as a cautionary tale for the next generation. Letterman taught us what to do, but also what not to do. And that is part of his enduring power. Today, David Letterman is more private than ever, but paradoxically, more open too. His Netflix show has let us see a side of him that few ever imagined possible, the patient listener, the reflective father, the man wrestling with what legacy means in an age of accountability. He often speaks about his son now, more than he ever did before. His love for his family is no longer something tucked away. It's front and center. In one especially moving interview, Letterman admitted, "When I was younger, all I wanted was to be famous. Now, all I want is to be kind." That's not a joke. That's wisdom. If there's one truth about Letterman's life, it's that he was never the perfect hero. He was complicated. Flawed. Often infuriating. But also brilliant, generous in unexpected ways, and, above all, evolving. In a world obsessed with perfection and image, David Letterman reminds us that it's okay to be a work in progress. That the road to redemption is real, but only if we walk it with honesty. He made people laugh, then made them think, and eventually, he made them feel. And maybe that's the highest form of comedy. What we take with us. So here we are. The boy from Indianapolis who lost his father too soon. The weatherman who cracked bizarre jokes on local news. The comedian who climbed the mountain, fell from grace, and somehow climbed back up, not to reclaim a throne, but to be a better man. David Letterman may have signed off from late-night television, but his journey didn't end there. It evolved, matured, and grew in ways we never expected. And that, perhaps, is the most inspiring legacy of all. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if you found a part of yourself in David Letterman's imperfections or evolution, then please, like, share, and subscribe. Join us next time for another true story that dares to go deeper than headlines and hearsay. Until then, take care of yourself, and remember, redemption is never out of reach, as long as we're willing to grow.